We lost our mommy. She went looking for food and never came back, the little black girl whispered to the lonely millionaire, not knowing this moment would change everything forever. The November wind cut through Chicago's Grant Park like a blade, carrying with it the first whispers of winter. Marcus Wellington III adjusted his Italian wool coat as he walked the familiar path, seeking solace in the only place that offered him peace from his suffocating world of board meetings and endless expectations. At 24, he had inherited more money than most people could spend in 10 lifetimes, yet felt emptier than the park's barren trees. His polished Oxford shoes crunched against fallen leaves as he approached his usual bench overlooking the lake. That's when he heard it, a soft whimpering that made him stop in his tracks. Hidden behind a cluster of oak trees, two small figures huddled together on a worn cardboard box, their thin clothes offering little protection against the bitter cold. The older child, a beautiful 7-year-old girl with intricate braids and wise eyes that seemed far too mature for her age, clutched her 5-year-old brother protectively. Both children were African American, their dark skin showing the telltale signs of weeks spent outdoors, dirt-stained cheeks, chapped lips, and the hollow look of hunger that Marcus had only seen in documentary films about poverty in distant countries. "Hey there," Marcus said softly, crouching down to their level, his heart already breaking at the sight. "Are you two okay?" The little girl looked up at him with wariness, born from too many disappointments. Her brother, barely more than a toddler, peeked out from behind her shoulder with curious brown eyes that should have been filled with joy, not the premature caution Marcus saw there. "We're waiting for Mama," the girl said, her voice steady, despite the tremor Marcus could detect underneath. "She went to find us food and said she'd be right back." "When was that, sweetheart?" Marcus asked gently, already dreading the answer. 3 weeks ago," she whispered, and Marcus felt his chest tighten. "Maybe 4. I stopped counting after the leaves started falling more." The little boy, who couldn't have weighed more than 40 pounds, tugged on his sister's torn sleeve. "Zara, I'm cold," he mumbled, his lips tinged blue despite his sister's attempts to keep him warm. Marcus looked around the park, realizing with growing horror that these children had been surviving here alone for nearly a month. His mind raced with questions. Where were the authorities? How had 2 small children remained invisible for so long in one of Chicago's most frequented parks? But more importantly, what kind of desperation had driven their mother to leave them here? "What are your names?" he asked, pulling off his expensive cashmere scarf and wrapping it around the little boy without thinking. "I'm Zara," the girl said, her posture straightening with a dignity that made Marcus's throat constrict. "This is my baby brother, Jamal. Mama calls him JJ when he's being good." Jamal smiled shyly at the mention of his nickname, and Marcus saw a glimpse of the happy child he should have been. Would have been in different circumstances. The sight nearly undid him completely. "Zara, that's a beautiful name," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion he wasn't used to feeling. "I'm Marcus, and I want to help you and JJ if you'll let me." The girl studied him with those impossibly mature eyes, and Marcus had the strange sensation that she was seeing right through him, past his expensive clothes and privileged upbringing, straight to his soul. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly. "Mama always said not to talk to strangers," Zara said carefully, "but she also said that sometimes angels come in disguises when we need them most." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes, actual tears, something he hadn't experienced since his parents' funeral 5 years ago. These children, who had every reason to be bitter and afraid, still held on to hope and trust. They were teaching him about faith in the span of a conversation that couldn't have lasted more than 5 minutes. "Tell me about your mama," Marcus said, settling more comfortably on the cold ground, ignoring the damage to his $1,000 suit. "What's her name?" "Dr. Sarah Chen," Zara said with unmistakable pride. "She's the smartest person in the whole world. She fixes people's brains when they're broken, and she saves lives every day." Marcus's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "A neurosurgeon. That changed everything." No neurosurgeon simply abandoned their children. Something catastrophic must have happened. His mind immediately began forming plans, connections he could call, resources he could mobilize. "She has magic hands," Jamal piped up suddenly, speaking for the first time. "Mama can make headaches go away just by touching here." He pointed to his small forehead with chubby fingers that were red from cold. "That's right," Zara said, stroking her brother's hair with a tenderness that made Marcus's chest ache. "Mama says we have the magic too, but we're too little to use it right yet." Before Marcus could ask what she meant by that cryptic statement, his phone buzzed with an urgent message from his assistant. The board meeting he'd been avoiding was in 30 minutes, and his presence was required to sign documents worth $50 million. The old Marcus would have apologized and rushed off to fulfill his obligations, but looking at these two precious children, who had been abandoned by a system that should have protected them, Marcus made a decision that would alter the course of all their lives. He silenced his phone and slipped it back into his pocket. "Zara JJ," he said, his voice taking on a tone of absolute certainty, "I'm going to find your mama, but first we need to get you somewhere warm and safe. Will you trust me?" The two children exchanged a look that spoke of conversations held in whispers during long, frightening nights. Some unspoken communication passed between them, and then Zara nodded. "Okay, Marcus," she said solemnly, "but promise me something. Anything. Promise me you won't give up on finding Mama, even if other people say we should stop looking." Marcus reached out and gently took both children's small hands in his larger ones, feeling their fragile fingers like bird bones beneath his touch. At that moment, he made a promise that would test every resource he had, challenge every assumption he'd held about his purpose in life, and ultimately lead him to discoveries that would shake the very foundations of medical science. "I promise," he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. "We're going to find her no matter what it takes." But none of them could have imagined the incredible truth they were about to uncover, or how their search would reveal secrets that defied everything they thought they knew about the human mind. Please like this video and comment below if this story touches your heart. Your engagement means everything to us. 3 hours later, Marcus sat in the opulent living room of his downtown penthouse, watching Zara help her little brother navigate a bowl of warm soup with the patience of someone far beyond her 7 years. The children had been silent during the ride up in his private elevator, their eyes wide as they took in luxury that most adults would find overwhelming. But they hadn't asked for anything, hadn't touched anything without permission, displaying a natural courtesy that spoke volumes about their upbringing. "This is the tallest building I've ever been in," Jamal whispered, gazing out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the Chicago skyline, spread below them like a glittering carpet. "Mama would love this view," Zara said softly, her small fingers wrapped around a mug of hot chocolate. "She always said cities looked like stars that fell to earth when you see them from high up." Marcus had already made a dozen phone calls, while the children bathed and changed into clothes his housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez, had hastily purchased. The missing person report filed weeks ago had yielded nothing. Dr. Sarah Chen had simply vanished from Chicago Memorial Hospital during her night shift, leaving behind her purse, her car keys, and no trace of where she might have gone. "Mr. Wellington," Mrs. Rodriguez said quietly, appearing in the doorway with the discretion that had made her invaluable over the past 3 years. "The private investigator you requested is here." Marcus nodded, then turned to the children. "I need to speak with someone who's going to help us find your mama. Will you be okay here for a few minutes? Mrs. Rodriguez makes the best cookies in Chicago." Zara looked up at him with those discerning eyes that seemed to see everything. "You're not like other rich people, are you?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "What do you mean?" "Mama used to work for rich people sometimes, fixing their brains when they got hurt in accidents or had tumors. She said most of them looked at her like she was just a tool, not a real person. But you look at us like we matter." Marcus felt that now familiar tightness in his chest. "You do matter, Zara. You and JJ matter more than any business deal or board meeting ever could." She studied him for another long moment, then nodded as if he'd passed some invisible test. "Okay, we'll wait here. But Marcus, yes, whatever that man tells you about Mama, don't believe it if he says she ran away on purpose. She would never leave us. Something bad happened to her. I can feel it." Marcus exchanged a meaningful look with Mrs. Rodriguez, who had raised 6 children of her own and understood the gravity in Zara's voice. "I believe you," he said simply. And he did. The private investigator, James Morrison, was exactly what Marcus had expected. A former police detective with 20 years of experience and a reputation for finding people who didn't want to be found. What Marcus hadn't expected was the grim expression on Morrison's weathered face as he reviewed the file. "I've seen the missing person report," Morrison said, settling into the leather chair across from Marcus's desk. Dr. Sarah Chen, 32 years old, highly regarded neurosurgeon at Chicago Memorial. No history of mental illness. No financial problems, no relationship issues that anyone was aware of. According to her colleagues, she was a devoted single mother who never would have left her children voluntarily. "Then what happened to her?" Marcus asked, leaning forward. Morrison's expression grew even more serious. "Mr. Wellington, I've worked missing persons cases for 2 decades, and I can tell you that when someone disappears this completely, this suddenly, there are usually only a few explanations. None of them are good." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the November weather outside. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that Dr. Chen didn't just vanish. Someone made her disappear. The question is whether it was voluntary or not." The words hung in the air between them like a death sentence. Marcus thought of Zara's absolute certainty that her mother would never abandon them. And his resolve hardened into something unbreakable. "I want you to find her," Marcus said, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to moving mountains when necessary. "I don't care what it costs or how long it takes. Those children have been through enough." Morrison nodded. "I'll need access to her hospital records, her financial information, her phone records from before she disappeared. I'll also need to interview her colleagues and any friends or family members." "Done, I'll make the calls tonight." Marcus paused, something nagging at the back of his mind. "Morrison, the children mentioned something strange. They said their mother had magic hands, and that they inherited some kind of special ability from her. Does that mean anything to you?" The investigator's eyebrows rose slightly. "Could be anything. Could be the children's way of processing trauma. Or maybe Dr. Chen had an unusual surgical technique that her kids didn't understand. Kids often mythologize things they can't comprehend, but even as Morrison said it, Marcus sensed there was more to it. The way Zara had looked at him, as if she could see straight through to his soul. The strange moment when Jamal had touched his own forehead and talked about making headaches disappear. Marcus himself had suffered from chronic migraines since his parents' death, stress-related, according to his doctors. Yet oddly, he hadn't felt even a twinge of pain since meeting the children that afternoon. "There's something else," Morrison continued, pulling out a tablet and scrolling through what appeared to be news articles. In the weeks before Dr. Chen disappeared, she'd been working on some kind of groundbreaking research, something to do with neural pathways and enhanced cognitive abilities. According to her research partner, Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, Sarah had made a discovery that could revolutionize neuroscience. Marcus's pulse quickened. "What kind of discovery?" "That's where it gets interesting. Dr. Hayes claims that Sarah had found evidence of a rare genetic mutation that appears to enhance certain brain functions, improved pattern recognition, heightened intuition, accelerated healing responses. Apparently, Sarah believed this mutation could be inherited." The pieces began clicking together in Marcus's mind with startling clarity. She was studying her own children. "That's my theory," Morrison confirmed. "And if she was onto something as significant as Dr. Hayes suggests, there could be people who would want that research for themselves. People who wouldn't hesitate to eliminate obstacles to get it." Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights, while his mind raced through the implications. Somewhere out there, a brilliant woman who had dedicated her life to healing others might be trapped, possibly hurt, definitely desperate to return to her children. And those same children, who had shown him more genuine human connection in 3 hours than he'd experienced in years, might possess abilities that others would kill for. "Find her, Morrison," Marcus said, turning back to face the investigator. "Find her fast, because I have a feeling that the longer she's missing, the more dangerous this situation becomes for everyone involved." As Morrison gathered his files and prepared to leave, Marcus made another decision that would have shocked his former self. He was going to protect these children with everything he had, even if it meant putting himself directly in the path of whatever forces had taken their mother. What he didn't know yet was that his decision had already set events in motion that would test the very limits of human possibility, and that the magic Zara and Jamal possessed was far more real and far more powerful than anyone could have imagined. Comment below and tell us, what do you think happened to Dr. Sarah Chen? Your theories keep this story alive. 2 weeks into the search, Marcus had transformed his penthouse into an unofficial command center. The dining room table was covered with medical journals, research papers, and investigative reports. His home office had become Morrison's secondary headquarters, complete with whiteboards mapping out timelines and potential leads. But the most significant changes weren't visible in the physical space. They were in Marcus himself, and in the 2 children who had awakened something in him he hadn't known existed. "Marcus, look what JJ did." Zara's excited voice called from the living room, where the children had been quietly playing while he reviewed Dr. Chen's research notes for the 100th time. Marcus looked up from a particularly complex paper about neural plasticity to see Jamal standing next to their housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez, his small hand pressed gently against her temple. The older woman's face, which had been creased with pain all morning due to what she'd described as a severe headache, was now relaxed and peaceful. "The pain is completely gone," Mrs. Rodriguez said in wonder, her voice carrying a note of awe that made Marcus's skin prickle. "I've had migraines for 20 years and nothing has ever worked that fast." Marcus set down the research paper and walked over to them, his heart beginning to race. "Jamal, can you tell me what you just did?" The little boy looked up at him with those innocent brown eyes, completely unaware that he'd just accomplished something that should have been medically impossible. "I made the hurt go away like Mama taught me. You just have to feel where the hurt is and then fix it." "How do you fix it?" Marcus asked gently, crouching down to Jamal's level. Jamal scrunched up his face in concentration, clearly struggling to put something complex into 5-year-old words. "It's like when you have a knot in your shoelace, and you have to find the right place to push to make it come loose. But instead of shoelaces, it's the hurty feelings in people's heads." Zara nodded seriously. "Mama said we inherited the gift from her grandma, who inherited it from her grandma. She said our family has always been able to help people this way, but we had to be careful who we told because some people wouldn't understand." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as the implications hit him. "Zara, did your mama ever tell you that there were people who might want to hurt her because of this gift?" The 7-year-old's expression grew troubled. "She said there were people who collected special things, and that if they found out about us, they might try to take us away from each other. She made me promise that if anything ever happened to her, I would take care of JJ and never let anyone separate us." The weight of responsibility settled on Marcus's shoulders like a lead blanket. These children weren't just orphans in need of care. They were potentially the key to medical breakthroughs that could change the world. And if the wrong people discovered their abilities? His phone rang, interrupting his spiraling thoughts. Morrison's name appeared on the screen. "I found something," the investigator said without preamble. "Can you meet me at Chicago Memorial in an hour? And bring the children. There's someone who wants to meet them." "Morrison, I don't think it's safe to—" "Marcus, trust me on this one. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes has information about Sarah that changes everything. And she's been protecting Sarah's research from people who would misuse it. She might be the key to finding her." An hour later, Marcus found himself walking through the sterile corridors of Chicago Memorial Hospital, each step echoing with the weight of anticipation. Zara held his left hand while Jamal clutched his right, both children unusually quiet as they navigated the maze of medical equipment and busy personnel. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes met them in her office, a small cluttered space filled with brain scans, research journals, and photographs of surgical procedures. She was a woman in her 50s with graying hair and intelligent eyes that immediately focused on the children with an intensity that made Marcus' protective instincts flare. "So these are Sarah's miracles," Dr. Hayes said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "She talked about you two constantly. Zara, she said, you could read people's intentions just by looking at them. And Jamal, she mentioned that you had healing abilities that defied medical explanation." Zara stepped slightly behind Marcus, her natural caution asserting itself. "Are you going to help us find Mama?" "I'm going to try, sweetheart. But first, I need to tell you all something about your mother's work that might help explain why she disappeared." Dr. Hayes gestured for them to sit, her expression growing grave. Sarah wasn't just studying neural enhancement as an academic exercise. She was trying to protect her children, and others like them, from people who would exploit their abilities. Marcus felt his blood run cold. What people? There's a private organization called the Cognitive Research Institute. On the surface, they appear to be a legitimate scientific foundation dedicated to advancing human potential. In reality, they're a collection of extremely wealthy individuals who believe that enhanced cognitive abilities should be harvested and controlled. For their own benefit, the room fell silent except for the distant sounds of hospital activity filtering through the walls. Marcus thought of his own vast resources, his family's connections to powerful people around the world, and wondered how many of them might be involved in something like this. 3 months ago, Dr. Hayes continued, Sarah discovered that the CRI had been monitoring her research. They'd even approached her with offers to fund her work, but she refused when she realized their true intentions. She was terrified that they would come after Zara and Jamal, so she disappeared to protect them? Marcus asked. Dr. Hayes shook her head grimly. I don't think Sarah disappeared voluntarily. I think they took her to force her to continue her research for them. And I think they're waiting to see what happens to her children now that she's gone. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. They're watching us, most likely, which means that every day those children stay visible, they're in danger. But there's something else, something Sarah discovered just before she vanished, that makes this situation even more critical. Dr. Hayes pulled out a thick file and opened it to reveal brain scans that looked unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The neural pathways were lit up in patterns that seemed almost artistic in their complexity and beauty. These are scans of Zara and Jamal's brains, she said quietly. What you're looking at represents the next stage of human evolution. Their abilities aren't just unusual, they're unprecedented. And according to Sarah's research, they're still developing. Zara suddenly gripped Marcus's hand tighter. Something's wrong, she whispered, her voice filled with the same mature certainty she'd displayed in the park 2 weeks ago. Someone's watching us right now. Someone who wants to hurt us. Before anyone could respond, the lights in Dr. Hayes's office flickered once, then went out completely, plunging them into darkness. In the distance, Marcus could hear the sound of approaching footsteps. Too many footsteps, moving with too much purpose to be normal hospital traffic. There's a back exit, Dr. Hayes whispered urgently, her voice barely audible in the darkness. Take the children and run. I'll buy you time. But as Marcus gathered Zara and Jamal close to him, preparing to flee into an uncertain future, he realized that running might not be enough anymore. The people hunting these children had resources and determination that matched his own. If they were going to survive, if they were going to find Sarah Chen and reunite this family, they would need to fight back. And in that moment of crystallizing resolve, Marcus Wellington III made a decision that would transform him from a reluctant heir into a protector willing to risk everything for 2 children who had already given him more purpose than 30 years of privilege ever. Had the emergency stairwell of Chicago Memorial Hospital had never felt more like a lifeline as Marcus carried Jamal while Zara ran beside them, her small legs moving with surprising speed and determination. Behind them, the sound of systematic searching grew louder, the doors opening, voices coordinating, the unmistakable efficiency of a well-organized operation. This way, Dr. Hayes whispered, leading them down 3 flights to a service level that most hospital staff never saw. The fluorescent lights flickered sporadically, casting eerie shadows on the concrete walls lined with maintenance pipes and electrical conduits. Who are those people? Marcus asked, his voice tight with adrenaline and protective fury. CRI operatives, Dr. Hayes replied grimly, using her keycard to open a heavy steel door that led to the hospital's underground parking garage. I've been expecting this for weeks. Sarah warned me they might come looking for information about the children's abilities. As they emerged into the dimly lit garage, Marcus's mind raced through their options. His penthouse was compromised. If these people had found them at the hospital, they certainly knew where he lived. His other properties were all documented, legally traceable. They needed somewhere off the grid, somewhere his wealth and connections couldn't be easily tracked. Zara, he said, setting Jamal down and crouching to meet her eyes. Can you sense if those bad people are close to us right now? The 7-year-old closed her eyes for a moment, her small face scrunched in concentration. When she opened them again, her expression was more serious than any child's should ever be. They're still upstairs, but they're spreading out. They know we came this way. And Marcus, there's something else. What is it, sweetheart? I can feel Mama. She's alive and she's trying to reach us somehow. Like she's sending thoughts across a long distance. Dr. Hayes stopped walking so abruptly that Marcus nearly collided with her. That's impossible. Sarah never demonstrated telepathic abilities in any of our research. Maybe she never needed to before, Zara said simply. Maybe being taken away from us made her abilities stronger. Like when people get super strong when someone they love is in danger. Marcus felt that familiar tightness in his chest, but this time it was accompanied by something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope mixed with absolute determination. If Sarah Chen was alive and somehow reaching out to her children, then finding her wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. Can you tell where she is? He asked Zara. The little girl closed her eyes again, this time for longer. When she opened them, tears were streaming down her face, but her voice was steady. She's somewhere cold and white with lots of machines. There are people in white coats who pretend to be nice, but their thoughts are dark. She's been trying to escape, but they keep giving her medicine that makes her sleepy and confused. Dr. Hayes and Marcus exchanged a look of horror. They're drugging her to suppress her abilities, Dr. Hayes said quietly. It's the only way they could keep someone like Sarah contained for this long. The sound of elevator doors opening echoed through the garage, followed by the unmistakable sound of multiple footsteps, moving with military precision. Marcus's protective instincts kicked into overdrive. My car is over there, he said, pointing to his black Mercedes in the executive parking section. But they'll be watching for it. Take mine, Dr. Hayes said, pulling keys from her pocket and pointing to a nondescript Honda Civic. It's not registered under my real name. I've been preparing for this possibility for months. As they hurried toward the car, Jamal suddenly stopped walking and turned toward the approaching sounds. Marcus, he said in his soft 5-year-old voice, the people coming are hurt inside. Not hurt like headaches, hurt like their hearts are broken. They're doing bad things because someone is making them scared. The profound empathy in such a young child's observation made Marcus's chest constrict with emotion. Even faced with people who wanted to harm them, Jamal was trying to understand their pain rather than simply fearing them. You have a beautiful heart. Buddy, Marcus said, scooping Jamal up and settling him in the back seat while Zara climbed in beside him. But right now we need to focus on staying safe so we can find your mama. Dr. Hayes handed Marcus a slip of paper through the driver's window. This is the address of a safe house that Sarah and I established months ago. It's completely off the books, purchased with cash through intermediaries who don't know our real identities. You'll find supplies there, secure communication equipment and copies of all of Sarah's research. What about you? Marcus asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. I'm going back upstairs to buy you time and misdirect them if possible. Sarah is my closest friend, and those children are the future of human cognitive evolution. I won't let the CRI turn them into laboratory specimens. Before Marcus could protest, Dr. Hayes was walking back toward the hospital entrance with the same determined stride that Sarah Chen probably possessed, the walk of a woman who had dedicated her life to healing others and wouldn't back down when the people she cared about were threatened. 20 minutes later, Marcus pulled into the driveway of a modest 2-story house in a quiet suburban neighborhood that looked like 1,000 other family homes across America. The normalcy of it was almost jarring after the intensity of their escape from the hospital. It looks like a regular house, Jamal observed, his nose pressed against the car window. That's the point, buddy. Sometimes the best hiding places are the ones that don't look special at all. Inside, the house was anything but ordinary. Dr. Hayes had been thorough in her preparations. The basement had been converted into a sophisticated research center, complete with medical equipment, computer workstations, and what appeared to be a small laboratory. The main floor looked like a normal family home, but Marcus noticed details that spoke of careful planning. Reinforced windows, multiple exit routes, and a security system that was far more advanced than anything a typical suburban family would need. Wow, Zara breathed, exploring the basement research area, while Jamal marveled at a wall of computer monitors. Mama would love this place. She always said she wanted a laboratory where she could work on helping people without anyone telling her what she was allowed to discover. Marcus was examining Sarah's research files when he came across something that made his blood run cold. Hidden among the technical papers was a handwritten journal, and the most recent entries painted a picture of a woman growing increasingly desperate to protect her children. "Listen to this," he said, reading aloud from an entry dated just 3 days before Sarah's disappearance. "The CRI isn't just interested in studying cognitive enhancement. They're actively recruiting children with abilities and separating them from their families. Their ultimate goal appears to be creating a new class of enhanced humans under their control. I've discovered they have facilities in 12 countries, and they've taken at least 47 children in the past 5 years. None of those children have ever been returned to their families. The weight of that revelation settled over the room like a physical presence." Zara sat down heavily on a lab stool, looking older than her 7 years. "Mama knew they were coming for us. That's why she had to disappear," Marcus realized. "She wasn't taken randomly. She was trying to lead them away from you and JJ." Jamal climbed onto Marcus's lap, seeking comfort in the way children do when the adult world becomes too frightening to process. "Is Mama going to be okay?" Marcus looked down at this precious little boy, who had already shown more courage and compassion than most adults ever would. Then at Zara, whose intelligence and intuition were extraordinary even by the standards of her unique gifts. The old Marcus would have made comforting but empty promises. But these children deserved truth even when it was scary. "I don't know, buddy," he said honestly. "But I promise you this. We're going to find her, and we're going to stop the people who took her from hurting any other families. Your mama sacrificed herself to keep you safe, and we're not going to let that sacrifice be for nothing." As if summoned by his words, the secure phone in Dr. Hayes' research center began ringing. Marcus hesitated. Only a handful of people could possibly have that number, and most of them were either missing or potentially compromised. Zara looked at the phone, then at Marcus, her expression suddenly alert. "Answer it," she said with quiet certainty. "It's something we need to hear." Marcus picked up the phone, and a voice he didn't recognize spoke with barely controlled urgency. "If this is Marcus Wellington, listen carefully. Dr. Sarah Chen is alive, but she's running out of time. The CRI is preparing to move her to a permanent facility in 48 hours. If you want to save her and stop them from taking more children, meet me tomorrow at noon at the address I'm about to give you. Come alone, but bring the children. Sarah's abilities are enhanced when she's emotionally connected to them, and we're going to need every advantage we can get." The line went dead, leaving Marcus staring at the phone while his mind raced through the implications. Someone else was fighting the CRI. Someone who knew about Sarah, about the children's abilities, and about their current location. The question was whether this mysterious ally represented salvation or simply a different kind of trap. But as he looked at Zara and Jamal, both of whom were watching him with trust and hope that he couldn't bear to disappoint, Marcus realized that the choice had already been made. They were going to that meeting, and they were going to get their mother back. What none of them knew yet was that the next 24 hours would reveal truths about the children's abilities that would fundamentally change not just their understanding of human potential, but their comprehension of what family truly meant when it transcended the boundaries of biology and genetics. If this story is giving you chills, hit that notification bell so you never miss our uploads. What do you think will happen next? The address led them to an abandoned warehouse in Chicago's industrial district, a maze of defunct manufacturing buildings that stood like concrete monuments to a more prosperous past. Marcus had barely slept the previous night, alternating between studying Sarah's research and watching Zara and Jamal sleep peacefully on the safe house's couch, their small bodies curled together in the way of children who had learned to find comfort in each other when the adult world failed them. "I can feel her stronger now," Zara said quietly as they approached the warehouse entrance. "Mama's close, maybe really close, but she's different. Like part of her is sleeping even when she's awake." Marcus's grip tightened on the children's hands. The mysterious caller had insisted they come alone, but every instinct he had screamed that this could be an elaborate trap. Still, after reading Sarah's journal entries about the 47 missing children, he knew they couldn't afford to ignore any potential lead. The warehouse door opened before they could knock, revealing a tall woman in her 40s with prematurely gray hair and the kind of intense focus that Marcus associated with military veterans. Her eyes immediately went to the children, and her expression softened with unmistakable relief. "You must be Zara and Jamal," she said, crouching down to their level. "Your mother talks about you constantly. I'm Agent Rebecca Torres, formerly FBI, currently very much off the books. And you," she looked up at Marcus, "are either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish to have gotten this involved." "Probably both," Marcus admitted. "But these children needed help and their mother is missing. What else was I supposed to do?" Agent Torres nodded approvingly. "Good answer. Follow me and prepare yourselves for something. That's going to challenge everything you think you know about reality." The interior of the warehouse had been transformed into a sophisticated operations center that made Dr. Hayes's safe house look primitive by comparison. Multiple computer workstations monitored feeds from around the world. Medical equipment that Marcus didn't recognize hummed quietly in one corner, and a large screen displayed what appeared to be architectural blueprints of some kind of facility. But none of that mattered the moment Zara gasped and pointed toward a medical bed set up in the center of the space. "Mama!" Dr. Sarah Chen lay unconscious on the bed, various monitoring devices attached to her body, her beautiful face peaceful but unnaturally still. She was thinner than in the photographs Marcus had seen, with the pallor of someone who had been kept indoors for too long, but she was alive and breathing steadily. Jamal broke free from Marcus's hand and ran toward the bed, but Agent Torres gently intercepted him. "Wait, little one. Your mama is okay, but she's been given some very strong medicine that we're still working to clear from her system. We need to be careful about waking her up." "What did they do to her?" Marcus asked, his voice tight with controlled fury. "The CRI has been using her as an unwilling test subject for the past month," Torres explained, her own anger evident despite her professional demeanor. "They've been studying her neural patterns while forcing her to enhance other people's cognitive abilities. The drugs they used to keep her compliant have damaged some of her short-term memory, but her core abilities appear to be intact." Zara approached the bed more cautiously, her 7-year-old face creased with worry and determination. "Can I touch her hand? Sometimes when people are hurt, touching helps them remember who they are." Torres looked uncertain, but before she could respond, Sarah's eyes fluttered open. For a moment they were unfocused, clouded with confusion. Then she saw Zara, and the change was instantaneous and miraculous. "Baby girl," Sarah whispered, her voice hoarse but filled with desperate love. "My beautiful, brilliant baby girl. I'm so sorry. I tried to come back to you. I tried so hard." Tears streaming down her face, Zara took her mother's hand in both of hers. The moment their skin made contact, something extraordinary happened. Sarah's eyes cleared completely, the confusion vanishing as if it had never existed. The monitoring equipment began beeping faster, showing increased brain activity across all measured parameters. "The neural connection between them is amplifying her recovery," Torres said in amazement, watching the readouts. "Her cognitive function is returning to normal in real time." Jamal climbed carefully onto the bed, settling against his mother's side with the natural grace of a child who had missed physical comfort for far too long. "Mama, we found you." "Marcus helped us find you." Sarah's eyes moved to Marcus, and he saw intelligence there that was both brilliant and otherworldly. This was a woman who understood things about the human mind that most people couldn't even imagine. And yet her most important identity was simply being a mother to these remarkable children. "Thank you," she said simply. But the words carried the weight of everything she couldn't express. Gratitude for protecting her children, for not giving up the search, for believing in the impossible. "How did you find her?" Marcus asked Torres, though part of his attention remained fixed on the reunion happening before him. "I've been hunting the CRI for 3 years, Torres replied. "They took my daughter in 2022. Emma was only 8 years old, but she could predict weather patterns with 97% accuracy. The CRI convinced my ex-husband that they were a legitimate research foundation that could help her develop her abilities safely." The pain in Torres's voice was raw and immediate. "By the time I realized what they really were, Emma had vanished into their network. I've been tracking their operations ever since, gathering evidence, building a case that nobody in law enforcement wants to hear because too many powerful people are involved." Sarah struggled to sit up, aided by her children, who seemed to instinctively know how to support her without interfering with the medical equipment. "Rebecca has been working to expose them for years. When I realized they were closing in on my family, I contacted her through encrypted channels. We developed a plan. A plan? Marcus asked. I let them take me, Sarah said simply. It was the only way to get inside their operation and document what they're really doing. Rebecca has been monitoring my vital signs and tracking my location through a subcutaneous transmitter that the CRI never discovered. You used yourself as bait, Marcus said, understanding dawning with a mixture of admiration and horror. I'm a neurosurgeon and a mother, Sarah replied. I know exactly how valuable my abilities are to them, and I know they would never seriously harm me as long as they needed my cooperation. But I also knew that eventually they would decide they had learned enough from me and move on to acquiring my children. Zara looked up at her mother with those impossibly mature eyes. That's why you had to leave us, to keep us safe. I hoped that by the time they finished with me, Rebecca would have gathered enough evidence to bring them down permanently. What I didn't anticipate was meeting someone like Marcus, who would risk everything to protect two children he barely knew. Torres had been monitoring something on her computer workstation while they talked, and now she turned to face them with urgent concern. Sarah, we have a problem. The CRI has discovered that you're missing. They're mobilizing resources to find you and the children, and their timeline has accelerated dramatically. What does that mean? Marcus asked. It means they've decided to abandon subtlety, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger as her connection with her children continued to restore her full capabilities. They're going to try to take Zara and Jamal by force, probably within the next few hours. Torres nodded grimly. But there's something else. Our intelligence suggests that the CRI's real goal isn't just to study enhanced individuals. They're planning to create a serum derived from the neural patterns of gifted children. A serum that would allow them to temporarily enhance the cognitive abilities of their wealthy clients. The full horror of it hit Marcus like a physical blow. They're going to use these children like raw materials. Not if we stop them first, Sarah said, standing up with surprising steadiness despite weeks of forced sedation. Rebecca, show them the blueprints we've been working on. Torres pulled up a detailed schematic on the large screen. This is the CRI's primary research facility, hidden beneath a legitimate pharmaceutical company in downtown Chicago. We estimate they're holding at least 15 children there, including my daughter Emma. Marcus stared at the complex layout of underground levels, security checkpoints, and what appeared to be medical laboratories. You're planning a rescue operation. We don't have a choice, Sarah said. The CRI knows that Zara and Jamal's abilities are exponentially more powerful than any they've encountered before. If they get their hands on my children, they'll have everything they need to create their enhancement serum on a massive scale. Zara had been quiet during this exchange, but now she spoke with a certainty that made everyone in the room turn toward her. Mama, they don't just want us for the serum. They want us because when all the special children are together in one place, something happens. Something that makes everyone's abilities much stronger. Sarah's face went pale. Zara, how could you possibly know that? Because I can feel them, the 7-year-old said simply. All the children they took. They're scared and lonely, but when they're all together, their thoughts touch each other and make each other braver. The bad people know this, and they want to use that power for themselves. In that moment, looking at this extraordinary family and the FBI agent who had sacrificed her career to find her own child, Marcus realized that they weren't just planning a rescue operation. They were about to attempt something that would either save 15 innocent children or get them all killed in the process. But as he watched Jamal take his mother's hand, and Zara's eyes begin to glow with a determination that seemed almost supernatural, Marcus knew there was no other choice they could make. The next few hours would determine not just the fate of Sarah Chen's family, but the future of human evolution itself. This is it, the final chapter. If this story moved you, please share it with everyone you know. Stories like this need to be heard. At 3 a.m., Chicago's downtown district belonged to shadows and silence, broken only by the occasional taxi carrying late-night workers home and the distant hum of traffic on the interstate. The Meridian Pharmaceutical Building rose 30 stories into the darkness, its glass facade reflecting the city lights like a monolith of corporate power. Few people knew that beneath its polished exterior lay one of the most sophisticated underground research facilities in the world. Marcus crouched in the alley behind the building with Sarah. Zara, Jamal, and Agent Torres, his heart pounding with a mixture of terror and determination. The plan they had developed was audacious in its simplicity and potentially catastrophic in its execution. Sarah would use her enhanced abilities, amplified by proximity to her children, to create a neural disruption that would temporarily disable the facility's electronic security systems. Torres would lead the tactical breach, while Marcus protected Zara and Jamal. The children, despite their young age, would use their unique gifts to locate and calm the other captive children during the evacuation. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked Sarah for the 10th time, his protective instincts warring with his rational understanding that she was the only one who could pull this off. "Marcus," Sarah said gently, her hand resting on his shoulder with surprising strength, "4 weeks ago, I was a single mother working double shifts at a hospital, trying to protect my children from forces I barely understood. Tonight, I have a chance to free 15 innocent children and destroy an organization that has been destroying families for years. I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Zara took Marcus's hand, her small fingers surprisingly warm in the cool night air. "It's going to work," she said with the quiet certainty that had become her trademark. "I can see it happening in my mind, like a movie that hasn't been filmed yet. The other children are waiting for us. They know we're coming." Jamal nodded solemnly, his 5-year-old face bearing an expression of resolve that should have looked ridiculous, but instead seemed profoundly moving. "The scared children need us to be brave first, so they can remember how to be brave too." Torres finished checking her equipment and looked at each of them in turn. "Once we go in, there's no backing out. The CRI will mobilize every resource they have to stop us. If this goes wrong—" "It won't," Sarah said firmly. "My children have shown me what's possible when love and courage work together. Tonight, we're going to show the world that some things are more powerful than money and fear." The infiltration began exactly as planned. Sarah placed her hands on the building's main electrical junction box, closing her eyes in deep concentration. Marcus watched in amazement as her face took on an almost ethereal glow, the same luminescence he had noticed in Zara's eyes during moments of intense focus. Suddenly, every light in the Meridian building flickered once and went dark. "Security systems are down," Torres whispered into her radio, speaking to backup agents positioned around the building's perimeter. Moving to Phase 2. The service entrance yielded to Torres's electronic lockpicks within minutes, and they found themselves in a sterile corridor that led to a bank of elevators. But instead of heading up into the pharmaceutical company's offices, they descended through a hidden panel that opened onto a stairwell leading deep underground. The CRI facility was everything the blueprints had suggested, and worse. Multiple levels of laboratories, holding cells disguised as comfortable bedrooms, and monitoring stations that tracked the neural activity of the captive children 24 hours a day. But what struck Marcus most powerfully was the silence, the unnatural quiet of children who had learned that making noise brought unwanted attention. "This way," Zara whispered, leading them through corridors she had never seen, but seemed to navigate through pure intuition. "The children are scared. They know something is happening, but they're afraid to hope." They found the first group of children on the 3rd sublevel, 8 kids ranging in age from 6 to 12, all sitting quietly in what looked like a cross between a classroom and a medical facility. When the door opened and they saw strangers, their first instinct was to shrink back in fear. But then Jamal stepped forward, his small presence somehow filling the room with warmth and safety. "It's okay," he said softly. "We're here to take you home to your families. You don't have to be scared anymore." The transformation was immediate and miraculous. The children's faces lit up with hope and relief as they recognized something in Jamal and Zara that spoke to their own suppressed abilities. Within minutes, the group had grown to include 15 children, all of them looking to Sarah, Marcus, and Torres with trust that was both humbling and terrifying in its completeness. "How do we get them all out?" Marcus asked, looking at the logistics of moving 15 children through a secure facility, while avoiding the CRI operatives who would certainly be converging on their location. "We don't sneak," Sarah said, her voice taking on a tone of absolute authority. "Zara, Jamal, I need you to hold hands with as many children as you can. Everyone else make a circle. What happened next defied every law of physics and neuroscience that Marcus thought he understood. As the children joined hands, creating an unbroken circle of connection, the air around them began to shimmer with an energy that was visible to the naked eye. The monitoring equipment in the room went haywire, displaying readings that exceeded the upper limits of their measurement capabilities, and then, impossibly, Marcus could feel what the children were feeling. Not just emotionally, but literally. Their thoughts, their memories, their individual gifts combining into something that was exponentially more powerful than the sum of its parts. Zara's intuitive abilities merged with Jamal's healing touch, amplified by the pattern recognition gifts of a 10-year-old named Emma Torres, enhanced by the emotional empathy of twins who could sense feelings across vast distances. Now, Sarah said, and Marcus understood that she wasn't just speaking to their group, she was speaking to every person in the facility, CRI operatives and support staff alike, projecting her voice directly into their minds with irresistible force. Everyone in this building will lay down their weapons and walk outside. You will not attempt to stop us or follow us. You will remember this moment for the rest of your lives as the day you chose to let children return to their families instead of using them for profit. The effect was immediate and absolute. Throughout the facility, Marcus could hear the sounds of people moving purposefully but calmly toward the exits. No alarm sounded. No security forces mobilized. The combined neural energy of the 15 enhanced children, focused through Sarah's trained mind and amplified by the desperate love of parents for their offspring, had created a field of influence that was simply irresistible. 20 minutes later, they emerged from the Meridian building into the pre-dawn darkness to find a scene that looked like a family reunion organized by divine intervention. Parents who had been searching for their missing children for months or years stood weeping in the street as FBI agents reunited families that the CRI had torn apart. Agent Torres held her daughter Emma for the first time in 3 years, both of them crying too hard to speak. Marcus found himself standing slightly apart from the reunions, watching Sarah embrace Zara and Jamal with the fierce intensity of a mother who had literally gone to hell to protect her children. The sight filled him with a joy so profound that it actually hurt. "Marcus," Zara called to him, breaking away from her mother's arms to run toward him. "You're not just watching, are you? You're part of our family now." Before he could respond, Jamal had wrapped his small arms around Marcus's legs, and Sarah was approaching with an expression of gratitude, mixed with something that looked remarkably like love. "You saved us," she said simply. "Not just from the CRI, but from believing that we had to face the world alone. You chose to protect 2 children you barely knew, and in doing so, you helped us discover that our abilities aren't just about individual gifts. They're about connection, about family, about what we can accomplish when we refuse to let fear separate us from the people we care about." 6 months later, Marcus stood in the garden of the home he had purchased for Sarah, Zara, and Jamal, a place where brilliant children could grow up safely, while their mother continued her legitimate research into human cognitive potential. The CRI had been dismantled through the evidence Torres had gathered, its leadership facing federal charges for child trafficking and illegal human experimentation. But the most remarkable change wasn't in the external circumstances of their lives, it was in Marcus himself. The hollow, purposeless existence he had known before meeting these extraordinary people had been replaced by something he had never thought possible, a sense of family that transcended biology and genetics, built instead on love, sacrifice, and the conscious choice to protect those who needed protection. "Marcus," Jamal's voice called from the kitchen window, where he was helping his mother prepare dinner with the serious concentration he brought to everything he did. "Mama says dinner's ready and she made your favorite." As Marcus walked toward the house, he reflected on the profound truth that Zara had spoken on that first day in the park. Sometimes angels do come in disguises when we need them most. He had thought he was rescuing 2 abandoned children, but in reality they had rescued him from loneliness, from meaninglessness, from a life spent accumulating wealth without ever understanding what made existence truly valuable. Inside the warm, bright kitchen, surrounded by the laughter and conversation of the family he had chosen, and who had chosen him in return, Marcus Wellington III finally understood what his parents had really left him in their will. Not just money and property, but the opportunity to discover that the greatest inheritance anyone could receive was the chance to love and be loved in return. And in the years that followed, as Zara and Jamal grew into their remarkable abilities while remaining grounded in the love and security of their unconventional family, that kitchen would become the heart of a home where miracles happened daily, not through supernatural powers, but through the simple, extraordinary magic of people who had learned that true wealth could never be measured in dollars, but only in the bonds of affection that connected one human heart to another. The end